Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. What does the former National Security Advisor think of the Indo-US nuclear deal and developments in Pakistan? Those are two critical issues I should explore today in the first of a two-part series of interviews with Brajesh Mishra. Mr. Mishra, let's start with the Indo-US nuclear deal. As a former National Security Advisor, are you satisfied that if India goes ahead with the deal, it won't in any way damage or constrain its strategic nuclear deterrent?
Well, after the talks I've had with various representatives of the government of India at a fairly high level and with some scientists, I'm convinced that there is not going to be any major impact on the strategic program that we have through the deal. If there is any impact on the program, it was because we have other constraints, like the lack of fuel, lack of fissile material, or not fissile material, uranium, etc. That is a possibility, but not through this deal. This deal doesn't stop us from continuing our strategic program in the way that we have tried to do it in the past.
Are you satisfied with the government's claim that the deal won't in any way lead to India losing its right to carry out further nuclear tests?
Yes, there is no doubt about it that there is no bar on India undertaking nuclear tests. Of course, exercising that option means a lot of hardship, economic and otherwise, because sanctions will inevitably follow. Now, people talk about the Hyde Act not permitting nuclear tests, but that's not really true. It is the 1954 Act of the US Congress, which is the mother of all acts, which imposes conditions, sanctions on those who undertake nuclear tests. So we are not barred from undertaking tests if we are ready to pay the cost of sanctions, etc.
So both in terms of future nuclear tests and in terms of any damage done to India's strategic nuclear deterrent, you're relatively satisfied that if India signs the nuclear deal, there will be no deleterious effect in either case?
Yes, as far as the testing is concerned, there is really no bar on you.
And as far as the deterrence is concerned?
As far as deterrence is concerned, knowing the conditions in this country, knowing what has happened in the past, I say yes, I am more or less satisfied.
Now, taking further this question of nuclear tests, do you accept that if a future Democratic president in America were to sign the CTBT, which many believe would likely to be the case, he or she would inevitably set in motion a chain of events which would lead to India also signing and thus foreclosing forever the option of nuclear tests?
Yeah, but why do you think it's only a Democratic candidate who might do it? It's a possibility that a Republican president would seek congressional approval for ratification of the treaty.
So whenever an American president signs CTBT, a chain of events will be set in motion leading to India signing as well, and therefore the option of nuclear tests will be closed forever at that point.
No, the US has already signed it. It's a question of ratification.
Right.
And since one is fairly certain that the Democrats will continue to control both houses of US Congress if they don't increase their numbers, I would say the ratification will come through. In that case, will India stand in the way of the treaty coming into effect? I doubt it.
So therefore, in due course, possibly within 2-3 years, America will ratify CTBT, India will be forced to follow through, and the option of nuclear tests will be closed.
It is bound to be closed, but let me try and go a little further in this manner. Unlike the NPT, which was a discriminatory treaty because it allowed certain countries to have nuclear weapons and continue to produce, etc., nuclear weapons, and not others, CTBT is something which is applicable to all. There's no discriminatory treatment in
which is why it would be impossible for India to hold out.
Which is why, if the other 40-odd countries mentioned in the treaty, there is an article which mentions that so-and-so has to ratify and adhere treaty before it can come into effect, India cannot hold back. India will have to sign it. And we will have no argument to go against it.
In which case, let me ask you the critical question. Given what you've just said, Are political parties mistaken in rejecting the Indo-US nuclear deal on the grounds that it would stop India carrying out further nuclear tests, or on the grounds that it does damage to India's nuclear deterrent?
In my view, we are not restricted from doing the carrying out tests, and more or less the program which we had devised before we left the NDA government is is ongoing.
So it follows that to reject the deal on these two grounds is mistaken.
Well, I would not agree with that point of view. Rejecting is too strong a word in that.
Rejecting is too strong a thing to do.
But I would not agree with it.
And you wouldn't agree with it. You wouldn't want to reject it. Let me then ask you this. On these two specific issues, has the BJP consulted you and sought your advice?
No, I have not been I have not been consulted by the BJP in the last 4 months or more.
Even though you were National Security Advisor of that government?
No, but that is a different thing. I had resigned from the party. I had resigned from the party before I took over responsibility.
Quite right, but you have an authority.
So my connections with the BJP were severed at that time.
But you have an authoritative opinion, and they haven't sought your advice or your consultation.
Well, you may consider it to be an authoritative opinion. I may consider it to be. They need not.
All right, let's leave that there. Let me put this to you. Do you accept the view that if the nuclear deal is not passed while George Bush is president, it's unlikely that the same favorable terms will be offered to India by any successor administration?
Yes, my view is the following, that in any negotiation you have two parties. If you want to renegotiate certain clauses, certain aspects of the treaty, well, the other party is equally entitled to do that. And the new administration, whether Democrat or Republican, may have some other ideas in regard to this. So it will become very, very difficult to renegotiate the treaty and have the same treaty for you to sign.
So if you want the same treaty on the same favorable terms, it's now or never?
It is now. It is now.
How serious a loss would it be for India if the government were unable to clinch the deal?
Well, in my view, it will be a severe loss of face for the government, both domestically and internationally. Having promoted the deal in India and abroad, after all, our negotiators have been talking to various countries who are in the NSG, in the Nuclear Suppliers Group, etc. So having promoted the treaty so much and so strongly, not to go through with it is a loss of face for the government of India and for India.
Would it also be a serious setback to India's hopes of acquiring dual-use technology and India's hopes of being able to develop a civilian nuclear energy sector?
No, obviously dual-use technology will not be available to us if we don't go through with this.
And that's a setback?
Of course it's a setback.
And we also won't be able to develop civilian nuclear energy effectively?
Well, I mean, that is, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not able to say to you what we will do and not. But I do believe that the three-stage program that we have, and you'll have to talk to scientists to get all the details on that, will suffer a setback.
Will suffer a setback?
This is my belief, but I'm not a scientist.
So in other words, your advice is that this is a deal we need, let's go for it.
I think we should go ahead with the deal, yes.
Should the government go ahead with the deal even if the BJP and the left remain adamant about it?
Well, Karan, that's a political question, and it's a political decision which they have to take. My personal view is, given the harmful effects of not going through with it, well, perhaps we should go ahead and do it.
We should go ahead and
do it. Perhaps. But I'm not a political man, so.
But as you said, leaving the politics aside, this is a good deal, go for it.
Yes.
Mr. Mishra, let's leave this particular subject there. In part 2, I want to come back and talk to you about developments in Pakistan. That's in a moment's time after the break. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an exclusive interview with the former National Security Advisor, Brajesh Mishra. Mr. Mishra, let's come to developments in Pakistan. How do you view the outcome of the recent elections in that country and the installation of a PPP, PML, ANP coalition government?
Well, the elections in Pakistan, which were by all accounts free and fair, relatively, have brought about a situation where, for the first time in decades, there is hope for democracy in Pakistan. The democratic forces have defeated once again the fundamentalist and extremist forces in the elections. The results in the Northwest Frontier province are there to see. Now, the results also indicate grave dissatisfaction with the previous regime, that is Musharraf regime, with PMLQ, with the King's Party, so-called, and indirectly disenchantment with the army, indirectly. So we have a situation where it is possible for us to look forward to a democratic Pakistan in the next decades, etc., in the coming years. Now, my view is that the democratic parties, which need to take on in one way or the other, either by negotiating or by coercive methods, the fundamentalists and the extremists, they need the support of the armed forces. They cannot do it without the support of the armed forces. And we have seen in the last 2-3 years that the armed forces have not been able to do it by themselves. They have lost 2,000 people, I believe, they say. There are over 80,000 troops in that area, but they have not been able to do it. So it's a combination of the democratic forces and the armed forces which has to tackle extremism, terrorism, fundamentalism in there. And I say that it is in India's interest, as it is in the interest of the European Union, the United States and others, to get the armed forces to fully support the civilian regime brought about by these elections. Now for India, what does it mean for India? The leader of the PPP has already spoken to you on your program some weeks ago. Mr. Nawaz Sharif has signed the Lahore Declaration in '99 with Prime Minister Vajpayee. And I say that the democratic Pakistan wants to have very good relations with India, wants to proceed further with India, which is good for us, and we should encourage that. So, all in all, India should not fight shy of saying that we are happy with a democratic Pakistan, that we want all the forces there, moderate forces, to support the democratic regime, to take on fundamentalism and terrorism and extremism.
You said a very important thing. You said we shouldn't fight shy of supporting democratic forces and helping them and encouraging them. How should we do that?
Well, I've just said that we should try and have a coordinated approach with the United States, with the European Union, etc., to see that the armed forces are fully with the democratic forces.
In this coordinated approach, should we also involve China? Because that's a third country.
Of course, if China can come in, it will be a very good idea. China should come in there.
So you're actually suggesting that the governments of India, America and China, to take 3 countries that have a certain influence in Pakistan, should coordinate to ensure that the armed forces and democratic forces in Pakistan stay united and together fight terrorism and jihadi elements in that country.
And this is nothing strange, because what I'm saying is in support of what the population of Pakistan, the electorate of Pakistan has already done.
So in other words, this would be encouraging the verdict that the Pakistanis have given themselves.
Exactly. This is the point I'm making.
The only anomaly could be people questioning whether China, which is a totalitarian country, can really play a role in encouraging democratic forces in Pakistan.
Yes, why not? Why not? Because, I mean, they themselves say that we have democracy of a kind. It may not be a Western democracy. But I don't see them opposing a democratic Pakistan.
Should the initiative in creating this sort of 3-party concerted action be taken by the Indian government?
Well, I believe so, yes. We are affected by events in Pakistan. We should do it.
So we should, in a sense, be the first to get in touch with Washington and Beijing and say...
If we are not already doing that.
If we are not doing it. Well, there's no acknowledgement we're doing it. There are no signs we're doing it. If we're doing it, it may be behind the scenes and quietly. So if we're not doing it, you're saying that the government should take the initiative, get in touch with Beijing and Washington, meet, coordinate policy, and the three countries should together effectively work to support democracy in Pakistan.
Yes, and we don't need to tom-tom about it. We don't need to go public and say, we have done this, we have done that, etc.
So we need to be strategic and secret and silent, but
Not
effective.
secret, but we need to be discreet about it.
Discreet but effective.
Yes.
And the reason discretion is important is you don't want the Pakistanis to feel that they are being pressured.
No, the reason I'm doing is that I don't want any force in Pakistan to say, well, the US was meddling in Pakistan, now so many other countries are meddling there. No, that's not my idea. My idea is to support the democratic forces there, which have already given a verdict. But I don't want to give a chance to the extremists and others to say that India is meddling in our affairs.
I understand. Let me take you to some of the comments that Asif Ali Zardari made in an interview to this program, which you referred to yourself generously a moment ago. He said that India and Pakistan should no longer feel hostage to the UN resolutions on Kashmir. Instead, they should set the Kashmir issue aside for a later, wiser generation to handle and get on with building up their relationship. Now, he may not be able, as a politician, to live up to all of that. But that apart, how important a statement was that?
It's a very important statement. But, Karan, I would like to say that what has been happening in the last 4 years or so? The two governments have been talking about Kashmir. At the same time, there have been other movements between the two countries. So what Mr. Zardari is saying is a continuation of the policies which have already been put in place then. And it is important to remember this, because one must not come to the conclusion that Mr. Zardari is taking an attitude or taking a position which is opposed to the position taken earlier by Musharraf regime.
Except that
it's not a good thing to happen there.
Quite right. It's not right to interpret Asif Zardari as if he's taking a position in opposition to Musharraf's earlier position, but nonetheless, the implication of what Asif Zardari said, not just in tone but in content, is that Kashmir is not a core issue in the sense of a stumbling block. It can be put aside, you can make advances elsewhere, and you can then come back and sort out Kashmir with the benefit of advances in the relationship that have taken place.
Well, of course, Mr. Zardari has to decide whether it can be set aside or not. My view is that the people of Pakistan are ready, and they have been ready for some years now, to move forward in their relationship with India.
In other words, Asif Zardari is only reflecting a popular mood.
In my view, that's true.
He's therefore the first politician courageous enough in public to reflect what is already the mood of his people.
Yeah, but I believe Mr. Nawaz Sharif was also working towards that end.
In the same way. Now, Asif Zardari said one other critical thing. He said the way to improve relationship is through trade. When the two countries establish interdependence, they will have a permanent stake in close relationship. Does that sound like a wise strategy?
I think it's part of a strategy. My view, if I may put it in the context of what Mr. Zardari has said, is that in a climate of improved relations between India and Pakistan, the problem of Kashmir will require another dimension than what it is today.
But that is the right road to go down.
In my view, yes.
Build trade, build
not
up
only trade,
all variety of contacts, and then come back and tackle Kashmir.
For example, Pakistan movie being shown here. Our movie is now, I believe there have been a little more liberalization about Indian movies being shown in Pakistan. You know, that kind of thing.
That builds the right atmosphere, then you can tackle Kashmir more effectively.
Right.
Mr. Mishra, let's end this particular interview there. Tomorrow on CNBC TV 18's India Tonight, I want to talk to you about India's attitude to the new government and political regime in Nepal. Is it a threat? Is it an opportunity? And I also want to talk to you about China. That's tomorrow night on CNBC TV 18 at 10:30 p.m. But for tonight, goodbye, good night.